Now that we've got the 3ds Max interface all set up the way we want it, let's learn about the basics of creating and manipulating primitives. A primitive is a building block object like a box or a sphere, and we can create them from the main toolbar here or from the command panel. So we have the create panel over here. Whether we create the object from the menus or from the command panel, we need to actually click and drag in a specific method to create that primitive. And the method for creation is different for each primitive. So it might take a little bit of getting used to. It's not like Maya or other programs where you say, create a cube, and then a cube is created in the center of your world. Here you have to interactively create that cube. So let's try it. Click on the box button, and then in the perspective view, click and drag, hold the mouse down. And we're determining the length and width of that box, and we can see that over in the command panel under parameters as we drag those numbers are changing. Release the mouse, and then drag upward, and that's setting the height. Then click, and the box has been created. The box tool is still active, so that button's still highlighted, so I can make more boxes. Click and drag to set the footprint. Release the mouse and drag upward to set the height. If you want to exit out of that box creation tool, you can choose another tool from the main toolbar up here. For example, we can choose the Select and Move tool. And now the selected object has a move manipulator known as a gizmo, G-I-Z-M-O. And that's just English slang for some sort of machine or small device. Okay, so the gizmo is the manipulator that allows us to move objects. And we can click and drag on the arrows here to move it in the cardinal directions of 3D space in X, Y, and Z, which is elevation in 3ds Max. I can click on another object to select it, and it's highlighted in blue, and once again I can move it. We can of course move it in the other viewports. I can go over to the top view, for example, and I can click in that view to activate it. And as I hover my mouse over that move gizmo, we can see that it's also got a little bracket there. If I click and drag on that bracket in the top viewport, I can move the object in the X and Y axes, but not in Z. Let's look at some of the other primitives. Over here we've got a sphere, and that's a very simple one because it only has a radius. Click on sphere, click and drag, and then release the mouse and a sphere is created. Another way to exit out of the creation tool is to right-click in any viewport, and that exits the tool. If an object is selected, you can go into its parameters in the Modify panel. So with that sphere selected, I can go over to the Modify panel and access its parameters or attributes such as the radius. And I can click and drag on the arrows here. That's called a spinner. Just click and hold the mouse down and drag up and down, and I can set the radius. Or of course, I could type in a value. I could set a value of 20. You may be wondering what units we're measuring in. These are 3ds Max generic units that have no specific meaning. We'll look at how to set up 3ds Max for different units of measurement later. Going back into the Create panel, we could try something else. For example, there's a cylinder. Click on Cylinder and click and drag to set the radius. Release the mouse and drag upward to set the height. Right-click to exit cylinder creation. Additionally, there are some very helpful extended primitives. If we go up into the pull-down list here, instead of standard primitives, we could choose to create some other type of geometry. So let's go to extended primitives. And here we have some useful ones such as chamfer box or chamfer cylinder. And this will create a primitive that has a chamfered or beveled edge, so it's not meeting at right angles. Because really no object in the real world is this perfect. And we won't be able to catch the light on that edge in our final rendering if there's no surface there. So let's make a chamfer object, like chamfer box. Click on that. And this one you'll have to click and drag multiple times in order to get all of the parameters. So click and hold the mouse, and drag that out to set the footprint of that chamfer box. And then release the mouse. Drag upward, and you're setting the height or the elevation. Click, and then drag again left to right. And you're setting the radius of the fillet. And that's the curved edge there. And then click again. And finally, we have created our chamfer box. If we're finished creating chamfer boxes, we could right-click, we could choose another tool, or we could actually just go to a different panel. I could go to the Modify panel. The object is still selected, and I can get at its parameters here. That's the basics of how to create primitives and how to move them around in 3D space.